Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? This time, we're going to explore something you probably use every day without a second thought.
It's amazing how often we encounter something so basic, yet rarely stop to consider all the complexities behind it.
Exactly. And today's subject is something that's both incredibly simple and surprisingly complex. Salt.
Salt, huh? I use it all the time, but I can't say I've ever thought that much about it. What's so fascinating about salt?
Well, for starters, even though we see it as this simple, white, crystalline substance, the chemistry behind it is actually quite remarkable. To really understand salt, we need to zoom in way down to the molecular level.
Okay, you've piqued my interest. Let's break it down. What exactly is salt from a chemical perspective?
So salt is what's known as an ionic compound.
Ionic compound. Okay, remind me, what does that mean again?
It means it's formed by the attraction between two ions with opposite charges.
Right, ions. Those charged atoms, one positive, one negative.
Exactly. And in the case of salt, the most common type we encounter is sodium chloride. That means it's formed from a positively charged sodium ion, which is a metal, and a negatively charged chloride ion, which is a non-metal.
Ah, so that's where those familiar names come in. Sodium and chloride.
No.
But it's more than just two elements hanging out together,
You
right?
got it. The real magic happens in how those ions bond. Instead of forming individual molecules like many other compounds, they create this incredible three-dimensional structure called a lattice.
A lattice. Like a garden trellis.
Well, sort of. Imagine a giant repeating network of positive and negative charges extending in every direction. Each sodium ion is surrounded by chloride ions, and each chloride ion is surrounded by sodium ions, all held together by those strong electrostatic forces.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. So it's not just a molecule, it's like a massive interconnected city of ions.
I love that analogy. And it's this intricate structure that gives salt its unique properties, like its high melting point.
Makes sense. Those bonds must be pretty tough to break apart. But speaking of melting, you mentioned something earlier about salt not always being a solid. Is that even possible? I thought salt was, well, salt always those little white crystals.
That's what's so cool about chemistry. Even something as familiar as salt can surprise us. While we usually encounter salt as a solid, there are certain types of salts, often with larger ions, that can actually exist in a liquid state at room temperature.
Whoa, liquid salt. That's wild. I can't even picture what that would look like.
Imagine a thick, almost syrupy liquid that can conduct electricity. These ionic liquids are pretty incredible, and they're opening up exciting possibilities in fields like green chemistry and energy storage.
Seriously. So we could potentially have batteries made with liquid salt. That sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It might sound futuristic, but researchers are already exploring the potential of these ionic liquids. It's a perfect example of how digging deeper into a seemingly simple substance like salt can reveal a world of unexpected possibilities.
I'm already starting to see salt in a whole new light. It's definitely more than just that little shaker on my dining table.
Exactly, and we've only just scratched the surface. So where does all this salt come from? I mean, we know we get it from the ocean, but how does it actually get there?
That's a great question, and it takes us on a journey back in time to the formation of our planet. The oceans play a major role in salt production, and the process is all about evaporation.
Evaporation. So the sun basically cooks up all that salt.
In a way, yes. As seawater evaporates, the concentration of dissolved minerals, including salt, increases. Eventually, the water becomes so saturated with those minerals that they can't stay dissolved anymore, and they start to crystallize out of the solution.
So it's like nature's way of concentrating those elements over millions of years, leaving behind those sparkly salt crystals.
Exactly. But here's the thing, the oceans aren't the only place salt can form. There are other ways, too, some of them even more dramatic.
More dramatic than the vastness of the ocean. I'm all ears.
Well, sometimes salt forms through direct reactions between metals and halogens. Think of the vigorous reactions you might see in a chemistry lab, sometimes with lots of heat and light.
Like those experiments where things fizz and pop. I remember those from high school chemistry.
Exactly. Those kinds of reactions can also happen naturally, deep beneath the Earth's surface, creating salt deposits over time. And believe it or not, some salt deposits are actually linked to volcanic activity.
Volcanoes. Spitting out salt. That's not an image I ever would have pictured.
It might sound strange, but volcanic vents, especially those found in the deep ocean, can release hot, mineral-rich fluids that contribute to the formation of salt deposits.
So not only do volcanoes shape the land, they also play a role in creating this essential substance we use every day.
It just goes to show you that even the simplest things have fascinating and interconnected stories to tell. And we're just getting started with exploring the wonders of salt.
This is blowing my mind already. I can't wait to dive deeper into this topic. We'll be back after the break to explore more about the unique properties of salt and why it's so important in our world. Welcome back, everyone. We're continuing our deep dive into the world of salt, and so far, we've learned about its intriguing chemistry and how those tiny crystals form.
It's amazing how something so seemingly simple can have such a complex backstory.
Right. It makes you wonder what role this ubiquitous substance has played throughout human history. After all, people have been using salt for centuries, long before we understood the science behind it.
You're absolutely right. Salt has been a cornerstone of human civilization for millennia, and one of its earliest and most important uses was in food preservation.
That makes sense. I mean, without refrigeration, how else would people have kept their food from spoiling?
Exactly. Before modern preservation methods, salt was the go-to solution. It draws moisture out of food, creating an environment where bacteria and other microorganisms can't thrive.
So basically, salt was like the ancient version of a refrigerator, keeping those precious food stores edible for much longer.
You could say that. It allowed people to store food for long journeys, survive harsh winters, and even trade food over long distances.
It's incredible to think how something as basic as salt enabled all that. It must have been incredibly valuable back then.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, salt was so valuable that in some cultures it was actually used as currency. The word salary itself comes from the Latin word for salt.
Wow, I never knew that. People were literally getting paid in salt.
You bet. It was a hot commodity, and control over salt production and trade routes could give empires immense economic and political power.
That makes you realize how a substance we take for granted today could have shaped the course of history.
Absolutely. Wars have been fought over salt. Empires have risen and fallen because of it. It's a fascinating example of how something seemingly mundane can have profound historical significance.
It really highlights the interconnectedness of everything, how a single substance can weave its way through so many aspects of human experience.
And speaking of interconnectedness, while we've been focusing on table salt, it's important to remember that there's a whole world of different salts out there, each with its own unique characteristics.
Oh, right. I've definitely seen those fancy salts at the grocery store. Sea salt, Himalayan pink salt, even black lava salt. What's the difference between all this? Are they really that different from regular table salt?
It all comes down to their origin and how they're processed. Sea salt, for example, is derived from evaporated seawater, and it tends to have a coarser texture and a slightly more complex flavor than refined table salt.
Oh, definitely notice that. Sea salt has a certain something that regular salt just doesn't have.
Exactly, and that something comes from the trace minerals that are naturally present in seawater. Things like magnesium, calcium, potassium, they all contribute to the overall flavor profile.
Ah, so it's like the ocean's own seasoning blend. And what about those pink Himalayan salt crystals? They're so beautiful, but are they actually healthier, like some people claim?
They are pretty, aren't they? That pink hue comes from trace amounts of iron oxide.
Wait, iron oxide, isn't that what makes metal rust?
The very same. But in this case, it gives the salt a beautiful rosy color. As for the health claims, well, the scientific evidence is a bit mixed. While Himalayan pink salt might contain slightly higher levels of certain minerals, the differences are usually not significant enough to have a major impact on health.
So it's more about the aesthetics and the marketing hype than actual health benefits.
Often, yes. But hey, if people enjoy the taste and the pretty color, there's no harm in that. The key is to be an informed consumer and not get swayed by misleading claims.
That's good advice for anything we buy, really.
Yeah.
So what about some of those more exotic salts, like that black lava salt I mentioned? What's the story behind those?
Those can be really interesting. Black lava salt, for instance, is harvested from volcanic regions and gets its dramatic dark color from activated charcoal. It has a slightly earthy, almost smoky flavor that can add a unique touch to dishes.
So it's like the gourmet version of salt, infused with the essence of a volcano. That's pretty cool.
There are all sorts of interesting salts out there reflecting different cultural traditions and culinary practices. It's really quite a fascinating world to explore.
It seems like we've only just scratched the surface of this salty world. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to our own bodies. We've touched on how salt is used to preserve food, but I'm curious about what role it plays in keeping us alive and functioning.
That's a great point. We all know that we need salt, but what does it actually do? And how does it impact our health? That's a topic for another deep dive, so stay tuned.
Okay, so let's dive into that then. Salt and our health. We hear so much about it, but it can be hard to separate fact from, well, All the noise out there.
It's definitely a topic that generates a lot of discussion and sometimes confusion, but at its core, the relationship between salt and our health is all about balance. We need salt, specifically the sodium in salt, to function properly, but too much can cause problems.
Right, so it's sort of like a Goldilocks situation. Not too much, not too little, but just the right amount. But what exactly does sodium do in our bodies? Why is it so essential?
Well, sodium is like a tiny but mighty electrolyte. It plays a key role in a whole bunch of processes, from regulating fluid balance to ensuring our nerves can send signals properly.
So sodium is kind of like the electrical wiring of our bodies, making sure those messages are getting transmitted.
That's a great way to think about it. And those electrical signals are crucial for everything from muscle contractions to maintaining a regular heartbeat.
Wow, so without enough sodium, our bodies would basically short circuit.
In a way, yes. Too little sodium can lead to all sorts of problems like fatigue, muscle cramps, even confusion. But like I said, it's all about balance. On the flip side, too much sodium can also throw things out of whack.
And that's where those health concerns come in, right?
Yeah.
High blood pressure, heart problems.
Exactly. Our bodies are incredibly efficient at maintaining a delicate balance of fluids, and sodium is a key player in that process. But when we consume more sodium than we need, our bodies try to compensate by holding on to extra water.
To try and dilute all that extra sodium.
Precisely. And that increase in fluid volume can put extra strain on our cardiovascular system, leading to high blood pressure over time.
So it's kind of like trying to force too much water through a narrow pipe. Eventually, something's got to give.
A perfect analogy. And that increased pressure on our blood vessels is what increases the risk of serious health problems like heart disease, stroke, and kidney disease.
Okay, so definitely not something to take lightly. But I have to admit, I get confused about how much sodium is actually too much. It seems like the recommended daily intake changes all the time.
You're not wrong. There's a lot of ongoing research and debate about the optimal sodium intake. But the general consensus is that most people in industrialized countries consume far more sodium than their bodies actually need.
So cutting back on salt is generally a good idea.
For most people, yes, especially if there are existing health concerns like a family history of heart problems. But, and this is important, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Some individuals might actually need to increase their sodium intake based on their specific health conditions or lifestyle.
So as with so many things, it comes back to that idea of personalized health. We can't just rely on generic guidelines. We need to understand our own bodies and what works best for us.
Absolutely. It's about making informed choices, listening to our bodies, and working with healthcare professionals to find that sweet spot.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the molecular structure of salt to its historical significance, its culinary uses, and its impact on our health. I feel like I have a whole new appreciation for this everyday substance.
It's amazing, isn't it? Sometimes the most ordinary things can be the most extraordinary when we take the time to really explore them.
And that's the power of a deep dive. We get to uncover those hidden layers of knowledge and see those unexpected connections. So, to wrap things up, is there one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
I think it's this. The next time you sprinkle salt on your food, take a moment to consider its incredible journey. From ancient seas to bustling trade routes to your very own plate, salt has been a constant companion throughout human history, and it continues to play a vital role in our lives, both literally and figuratively.
That's a beautiful way to put it. A reminder that even the most basic things can hold so much meaning in history.
Absolutely. So keep those minds curious and never stop exploring the world around you, no matter how familiar it might seem.
Well said. That's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of salt. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have. Until next time, keep exploring and stay curious.